So next up, we are going to jump to the DT Hub Working Group Business Case and Demonstrating Value. And I would like to introduce Davin Crowley-Sweet, Chief Data Officer of National Highways. Over to you.
Thank you. How are you all doing? Thanks for that. That was very kind of you. I'm nice to see my habitual hecklers have sort of also joined the room. So I'm Davin Crowley-Sweet. I'm Chief Data Officer for National Highways. So my day job is looking after all data and digital for everything to do with our strategic road network in England. And I also serve on the board, along with Liz, for the DT Hub, looking after all things here. I'm really delighted to hopefully what we'll have be a two-way conversation today. You've had lunch, you're not getting off lightly to come in here and snooze. We will be having a conversation, forced or otherwise, and I'm relying on said hecklers earlier to lob in difficult questions as and when needed. So welcome. You're going to hear from myself and Liz today, and some of our team we've also brought, because Liz and I are not in the credit of claiming victory for the work that other people did for us, and we want to make sure that the people who work in our community get the thanks and credit that they deserve for all the effort they've been putting in. So what's this about? Demonstrating value and business cases for digital twins. So I'm going to do that through the medium of story. I hope that's all right with everyone. And I wanted to pose a question to you. Why do we not invest in digital twins to the degree that we should? The technology exists, the data exists, the benefits exist, the drive exists. What is stopping us as a sector globally properly chucking in investment into actually doing digital twins and connected digital twins? Yeah, exactly. That look, exactly. And we had a hypothesis. And our hypothesis was that our practitioners and our leaders don't have the language to create shared meaning when we have a conversation. You know, my wife is from Japan. Her native language is Japanese. You cannot imagine the fights we have had over misunderstanding things when we thought we were talking about the same thing. It's insane the way it goes, but it's true. And so what we set about doing is thinking about what could we do to create shared meaning across the community to be able to have rich conversations around the value of digital twins, so that our practitioners could sit in a room with a CFO and not feel intimidated and not wonder why their investments for a data lake are turned down because the CFO is looking at them dumbfounded, don't know what they're talking about. But equally, how do we equip our senior leaders be able to have the conversation and understand the value of data, digital and technology to their business? So that's what we hope to try and get to do today. It's the start of something. This is not the end of it. A big objective for us was to create the environment where we created a lasting capability of people producing content to the DT Hub members that help them have the conversations that ultimately last in future investment. So here's a scenario that I think is you might all recognise. You land in an organisation and you have this really good idea for how digital twins can go. You build a bit of buzz, you build a healthy community behind you, and everyone's like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then there's this shock horror moment where your dream investment suddenly becomes a software platform implementation program that's benefits case is based upon reduction of IT operating costs as opposed to generating value from digital twins. It doesn't deliver its investment. All the pizzazz and drama fades and you're just another technology program floitering around, I think is a word. And 3 years later you repeat and wonder why this backing behind digital twins doesn't exist. Even though, as I said earlier, the value's there, the data's there, the technology's there, the costs at which you can do it now make these things scalable and achievable. We're no longer dealing with new customized products. These are commodity services and almost utility. And we think it's down to language. And our view was, how can we make connected digital twins if we can't even connect ourselves with our senior leaders or our senior leaders with our practitioners? So what I want to introduce today is the commitment that Liz and I made to our governor about what we were going to do about it, one of the 4 themes in the Digital Twin Hub. And our case for change was here, that we believe that we need to help our members to be able to make the case to invest in digital twins. And we felt that we wanted to create an outcome that was all about increasing that level of investment. And that was about making sure that our senior leaders had greater understanding of what digital twins did. It was equipping our people and our practitioners, the digital twins, with language to be able to have richer conversations with private equity companies or client organisations or the leaders of their organisation. And long story short, we said we would create 4 things, 2 of which we've started to do, and we've got a presentation from some of our people. And we wanted to do a couple of things. So the key ones we're going to show you today is we wanted to create a framework for describing value. You know, at national highways, if I go and improve my maintenance on how I do a bridge inspection, there is a value case behind that. The railway has exactly the same bridges as me. Other people have exactly the same bridges as me. We share assets, we share value, we share success stories. So why can we not create a pool of value propositions so that if you want to do something about improving from condition-based maintenance to risk-based maintenance for your infrastructure, you're not trying to run around and create a library of benefits. You've got a community of people who have worked on those assets, got some experience, and been able to describe the value. And it's not about having pounds and pence figures that you can just steal and borrow. It's about showing that, you know, I've got a shared problem. What was your experience? How did you land your story? And where do we share? We also said we wanted to produce these things called personas. So hands up here if you've ever had a one-to-one conversation with your CFO. No, not many hands, right? If you did have to have a conversation, what's the language you should use? How should you position your investment into digital twins? How should you describe it? How do they see the world? You know, it's very different to how I see the world as a data professional. That's one person you've got to influence. What about the chief people officer, the chief commercial officer, the chief revenue officer, the chief marketing officer? All these different people who have all these different perspectives of what value means to their business. And could we start creating a library of personas that help people understand their native language to help our practitioners be able to have a richer conversation with them? So where that's landed from my own personal perspective, because I think it's important we make this real, is I got stuck in that loop earlier where I was struggling to make investments. All my investments for my career started grand, ended up being a SaaS license. You know, that's not very thrilling. We did a piece of work around valuing our data as an asset. You know, helping reframe our digital twin through the language of financial value and assets, which was a language our business understood. And from that one conversation, that one piece of work, a whole stream of events, investment and growth happened. Not because we were doing something different or I suddenly stumbled upon the best piece of latest technology, because we made an emotional connection with the people that we had to demonstrate value to. We spoke their language. Rather than getting 7,000 people in my organisation to speak data, we taught 50 people in data to speak business. So that's what we're trying to get across today. It's a community thing. Lots of people have contributed to this, and we hope this is the start of us building a portfolio of resources that help our members get investment and grow as a collective. I'm going to introduce Liz, who's been an absolute super vital best friend partner in this, in really driving it out, tell a bit about her story and her angle on this too.
Thank you very much, Davin. I'm going to stay seated after a big lunch and feeling quite comfy and ready for a siesta over here down the end of the line. But yeah, Davin and I have been partners in this particular crime now for the last year or so. And I joined the Digital Twin Advisory Board because I really wanted to learn about digital twins, and this particular work stream really appealed. Because if I'm honest, a year ago I felt a bit of a fraud joining the advisory board because I was struggling, just like Davin, to try and make a business case for digital twin in my organisation, a city council, and struggling to understand how I could sell that into our executive management team, our leaders, from both an officer and a political footing as well. And as you can imagine, that's very, very different drivers for appealing to those senses. I'm pleased to say we've come a long way. We now understand a number of use cases where we feel a digital twin could really help us in the authority. In fact, back in my local authority in Sunderland in the northeast of England, there's a number of value assessment workshops going on this week. We're looking at digital twinning around road infrastructure and simulations to understand a movement strategy for the city centre and how we can simulate different options and opportunities around different road infrastructure and the impact of emissions, etc. In doing so, we're looking at homes of 2030 and modern methods of construction and using digital twinning and simulation to understand the differences and the choices that we make and the impact of those choices. And finally, like we've heard a lot today, we're looking to use digital twinning in terms of our net zero ambitions and being net zero as a local authority by 2030 and as a city by 2040. And the word connected, and we talk about connected digital twins a lot in terms of technology, but for me, sat in a business and working very much for the residents, the businesses, the visitors to my city, it's about connecting use cases that make sense. and making those correlations between those different use cases. So to have a tool that really helps me set out a business case and to have some techniques to how do I sell it into my C-suite, my executive management team, my corporate management team, whatever language we use in our business areas was really, really important. And it's been a great opportunity to work with people in terms of achieving just that. So this is something that we've worked on together. We've we'll openly admit we've plagiarised, we've used people's wealth of experience and knowledge. You'll have seen similar tools. This sure won't be the only one. We're not saying it's the right one. It's just been a helpful framework for us in trying to set out the business case, the value of a digital twin for our organisations, but from a high level where we can appeal to that C-suite who, let's face it, get completely lost when we talk about technology or we talk about data. They really want to understand the value from their perspective. So setting out a simple problem, this is based on a use case in Germany around a connected city. Two big use cases, one around urban mobility, similar to something I'm doing, and one around planning infrastructure as well. So the problem, what the solution could be in terms of that digital twin, how that future solution could manifest itself over time, and importantly, what are the solution benefits, looking at things like environmental sustainability, efficiency, longevity, cost effectiveness, etc. You'll see on the other side. So a really helpful framework for us across a range of sectors in just trying to think about the important components in setting out a value case for a digital twin. And we can't get away from the technology. At the end of the day, these are technology solutions. So again, at a high level, setting out what is the technology perspective. And again, I think I heard upstairs in one of the talks earlier, that can be very far-reaching, from all the initial sensors and applications out there gathering data across our infrastructure, across our cities, etc., through to the connectivity layer, into the data aggregation, and then into the visualization simulation components, and not one technology but many doing that, through to mitigations and challenges and the future of that solution. And then again, and Davin mentioned, appealing to the CFO, having to really just think about the business case, the market overview for digital twins in any particular sectors, looking at it potentially across the world, etc., just drawing things together at a very high level to present a value assessment and a business case for a digital twin. And whilst we found this really appealed in terms of a connected place, we also found equally that it was relevant to other sectors. But again, to support the C-suite, to support the key decision makers, showing them that this is happening in various areas, either within the UK or further afield across the world. And supporting us in our journey, as Davin has said, we've worked with some fantastic people who volunteered to become part of our working group. Always great when you get volunteers. And I'm just going to invite Iria up to stage now to tell us about her experience of applying this in the transport sector. Would you come and join us?
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure collaborating with the working group. So we were giving a value framework where my role was doing a literature review existing digital twins, and I focus on transportation, bridges, and asset management because I have a background in bridge engineering and looking at sustainability, and I thought it was really important to highlight how digital twins can improve design, assessment, and performance, and provide real-time data that can improve decision-making, bringing in value to asset owners, at the same time reducing costs, improving environmental performance. And I wanted to a little bit focus on this problem statement where we have a lack of data, there is uncertainty, where we don't really understand how assets perform in terms of all infrastructure within transportation. I think digital twins can help bring value to understand how our structures perform and how this could bring benefits to society and the environment as well. And so it's been really enjoyable working with Liz and all the working group. And I would like to encourage everyone to join the working group that will be open later on. And perhaps I could a little bit talk about the technology, how following this template help us understand what is important to communicate when we want to engage other people in the conversations, and understanding how we can get more around KPIs and understand how this brings value to asset owners, particularly through the technology, but you don't really need to be an expert in digital twins to understand this. So this is like an interdisciplinary approach, so it's important to get everyone involved, and having this a visualization of the benefits, I think, is really important. And I will advise just to take a look at the slides in detail, because there is so much information in here. And I'd like to say that's really important as well, the collaboration between academia and industry. So I think this is why we're all here today. And thank you.
Thank you. And I just have to give special mention as well to colleagues Kevin and Austin at Arup. Kevin actually prepared the earlier business case that I presented, and Austin has been tremendous in pulling together the presentation, the slides for us. So just a couple of big key thank yous there. So just over to the persona piece to finish off before I hand back to Davin. We decided to create a number of personas that could sit around a C-suite, an executive management team, a corporate management team table. This isn't factored, I have to say, on any particular organisation, and these do not represent any individuals whatsoever. So nobody sue us or, any liability issues following, but just a range of different people that we felt we needed to appeal to, key decision makers in different organisations. And really, again, just for each one of those, we're not going to take you through everybody, I do promise, but looking from everybody from a senior politician, a leader of a council, a CEO, financial, chief information officer, a people officer, through to the technology officer. We've obviously got twins there. Somebody got a bit carried away with copy and paste, didn't they? But just thinking about the different motivations for those people. So if we look at something like a leader of a council, very relevant to my world. Yep, there we go. This is Dina. She's leader of a council. Obviously, Dina's responsible for strategic and political leadership. She's responsible also, though, as a ward councillor for representing the views of her constituents in her local ward. So what's going to appeal to Dina when I'm trying to sell to Dina the benefits of a digital twin, and I'm trying to persuade her to take this through her cabinet and invest in something of this size? For her, that's going to be about, this will give you scientific and evidence to make better decisions. Yeah, and leaders of councils make some very contentious decisions, so it will give her that evidence base in order to stand by those decisions. It will give her tools that she can go out and engage with her communities in a much more engaging manner to invoke behaviour change, which is what Dina needs to do in terms of achieving some of the big goals and some of the big commitments in her manifesto. It will ensure that the organisation that she runs is applying its resources more effectively. So they're the kind of key benefits for Dina, and that's how we'd approach selling this to somebody like Dina. Completely differently, a CFO, and apologies if there's any financial officers in the audience here, but there we're talking about sound financial investment. We're talking about optimal resource allocation. They're interested in understanding the cash flow for an organisation and ultimately having to give the financial due diligence in terms of any kind of decision making going through. So just a very different way of approaching very different people. And again, through our working group, through the conversations that we've had, we've found both of these techniques and both of these tools in a much bigger toolkit helpful in terms of what we need to try to achieve. Davin?
Yeah, so short and sweet presentation, because we were actually hoping for a conversation about your experiences on this. Takeaway points from me is this is the beginning of a capability. It is a library of tools to help equip our people with the language that they need to secure investments in digital twins. And it does that in two ways. It helps share a common understanding of what value means. There's millions of value frameworks. We're not proposing another one. We are proposing a library of shared stories that people can add to, What worked well for you? Tell us. Tell us the conversations you had with whom and what resonated with people, and update it. What didn't work? As Ian Gordon I've just seen join in. Me and Ian have had a million failures for every one success that we've had. So we've got some horror stories of where conversations have gone wrong, and what did we need to do and where did it go wrong? We can't have connected digital twins unless we've got connected companies. And we can't have connected companies until we create the beginnings of a framework to have shared conversations in shared meaning that ultimately describe value. So that's what this is the beginning of, a toolkit that you can go to help you sell your story, to help you maybe understand the perspective of an organisation, senior players, through their lens, So you're not banging your head against the wall selling ontologies when they have no idea what you're talking about. Hopefully the presentation's been useful. Again, thank you to Ira and the team for the immense work that they've done in a ridiculous short amount of time. And thank you for Liz as well for always having my back and driving this too. So we really welcome a conversation about this. This is a chunky subject. So yeah, don't pull your punches on any questions. Hecklers, do your thing.
And as Davin mentioned, we're going to jump into questions. And as with previous sessions, we are going to be using Slido. So I encourage everybody to go to Slido. You can see the QR code there, or go to CDT Summit, and you can put your questions in there and upvote other questions that you find relevant. We're going to jump right into the questions here. With our first question to the entire working group, how do you deal with defining value and benefits for all participants in connected digital twins, noting that there will be different values and benefits depending on the organizations?
I think that's the very nature of having a library, that there's not one way to describe value. It's understanding the different ways to describe value. We were really fortunate that in the Digital Hub board that we have Paul Lamb. And Paul Lamb comes from investment banking and banking. So we were all having a conversation about here's our experience from an infrastructure owner and then a council. And Paul comes along and says, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is what a private equity firm sees the world like. You know, we talk about net present value. Where's that thinking in there? So I don't think there is one way to describe value. I think can we describe the different types of value, whether they be social value, economic value, financial value, tangible, intangible value, and make a catalogue of them so that you can pull down the right way to express value depending on who you're talking to. So to answer the question really bluntly, I don't think there is one way. I don't think there's a single framework. I think there's loads of success stories in how we've articulated value that we can pull from. And it's about knowing who you're talking to. And this is where the personas become really powerful, that gives you an idea of their view of the world and then which type of value you should be discussing. So if you're talking with the CFO, you're talking about financial and value, and this is how to describe it. But if you're talking to your director of sustainability, here's the environmental value and here's how to describe it. So that's the direction we were trying to take things. Liz, is there...
Really, it's very much about the time we spend in terms of defining that value before we actually dive in and start architecting anything. And really understanding the value that we're trying to achieve from different use cases. That's the stage I'm at my organisation now. We'll probably spend the next 7-8 weeks defining value, understanding what it is we're trying to achieve out of our 3 use cases, understanding the data that we need, understanding then, only then, if we achieve all of those, how actually we're going to architect that into some form of a digital twin. So I think really truly understanding the value from individual use cases, but then aggregating that value up as you start to layer those, for me is really important. And back to that connected piece, not just connecting technology, not just connecting data, but connecting the value then wider for the, a city perspective, an organisation perspective, etc.
Great. So we have a lot of questions. So as I said, make sure to upvote questions that you like. The next question. Have you resolved the role of traditional IT departments in leading this work versus SMEs in wider organizations?
Oh, God, you're looking at me. Is that yours, is it?
Yes.
It is.
If you could give me the answer to that, that'd be great.
Your IT director's not in the room, are they? I think there's something about asking for forgiveness rather than permission, doing it and leading it and taking that risk. But ultimately, again, what's the value drivers for an IT function? I found traditional IT functions care about service cost, cost of service. So I think if you can start articulating in their language, how is this going to help you automate and reduce your cost? How is this ultimately going to stop your people working at 3 a.m. because the server's gone down? Then suddenly they don't need to feel to lean into an area that's beyond their capability or beyond their traditional skill sets. ITIL won't help you solve IT problems. So I think it goes back to language, and I think it goes about appetite for risk-taking. But I think learn from the CIO functions, I think. 20 years ago, that role didn't really exist to that degree, yet now they're on every board, they're on every executive committee, and if you were to order organisations by who holds the purse strings, they're sitting on the big budgets. And there's a reason for that, because they've sold their story, they've sold their value. So I think rather than fighting it, let's learn from them, bring them on the journey. But ultimately, I think we need to lead it.
Yeah, perhaps a little bit of an opposing view there. We like opposition, don't we, on these panels? But I think in my organisation, I mean, my role in the organisation is Director of Smart Cities, so I'm coming at this from a much wider angle, and I think the value case for us and the way that we're selling it into our organisation is that it will help us, it will give us a scientific and evidence base to make better decisions. We will spend our money more wisely. We will be able to track the impact of those decisions and intervene and make better investment decisions as a result of that. And actually it will give us true engagement tools to be able to bring our communities with us in the decision that we make. So we couldn't do any of this without our CIO, without our data specialists being behind this, behind a whole host of SMEs and behind a whole host of different players in an ecosystem, all the way through from sensors to applications to connectivity layers to data aggregation to visualization to simulation to all of those good things we've heard today. But actually that's almost the magic behind the scenes that makes it happen. Actually, as I say, we're selling it across the organisation in terms of it not being a technology tool.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to understand the audience that's going to be looking at that particular problem itself, and I think understanding the basics and going back to the National Digital Twin, understanding the fundamentals will give you more confidence on how you can actually apply digital twins in practice. Just referring back to that.
Okay. So our next question, for the UK, what would good look like in the short, medium, and long term in terms of adoption? Also in terms of like industry, when compared to like local government or the public?
I would actually link Jim's question with Miranda questions underneath it. So for me, what does good look like in the short term? It's when we recognise the values in the data and how it supports the decisions that we need to make, as opposed to it's another black box. You know, we've proved in my own company, Highways, that our data is worth 60 billion. But if you look on our balance sheet at what our roadside technology is worth, it's something like 3.6. So you do the maths on that, and our data is worth 15 times the value of the technology. Our road itself, the replacement cost of it is 140 billion. So our data is worth half the value of the road itself. You know, that changes your priorities on where's the value coming from and how do we need to structure ourselves around that value. So I think short term for me was that we become organisations, especially in the built environment space, that are structured around the value of our assets, infrastructure and digital, and not just organisations structured around the physical asset and trying to create a digital representation with the spare cash we got. That would be the short-term goal. The medium-term goal is actually that we digitise ourselves. You know, that I have a digital twin of the SRN and there's digital twins of local authorities. And then the long-term goal is the connectivity between them, because that's where the power comes in. You know, do I build a road or do I do town planning differently? Do you build rail or do you build a port? All of those different things. And I think they're the big system level questions that we should do in the long term. And then once you're dealing with that system, I don't think you're talking about industry, government anymore. I just think you're talking about what the systems do. You're talking about transport, regardless what sector it happens to sit in. That would be my take on it. But absolutely links to Miranda's question around where is the actual value coming from. And I think that will change how we invest.
And I think just to build on what Davin said there, I'll agree with you this time, Davin, but it's about that storytelling. It's about having those proven use cases where you can show people the value that your investment in digital twin has proven for you. And I think, you know, short term that builds up, and perhaps on an individual level, individual use cases, much more easy to prove in, you know, the advanced manufacturing sector, perhaps the transport sector. But then as we start to move on, as we start to get to medium and longer term, those stories become much more sophisticated, and then we start seeing the power of that collaboration and that connectivity of digital twins for different use cases and for overlapping use cases as well.
Great. So our next question, is there a database of quantitative value provided by digital twins?
I think it's a good question for you. Is there? Do we have one here?
I can't necessarily answer that, but I can tell you we're working on it. So we'll jump to the next one then. So David from KPMG, I love the personas. What would really be helpful is if there's a do versus don't say when it comes to interacting with each persona type. So do you have any suggestions?
I like the idea. I don't know what to say to that. I think it's really good. I think we need to take it on board and do it.
I Sat last weekend and created a couple of those personas, and I think actually it's really helpful in doing so, because as you're creating a persona for one person type, you then start to think, well, I certainly wouldn't be saying that actually if I was talking to the people management officer, you know, or actually I perhaps wouldn't touch on that bit if I'm talking to the CIO. So actually I think by having those persona kits, you look at one and think, right, definitely don't say that to the other persona type. So I think that will come naturally out of creating that library of personas.
Well, I think we just have to govern that, what we don't say quickly before we find out our material saying don't tell the truth to the people in audit. So it's
Okay, great. So for our next question, I appreciate what you say, and it is quite helpful that we can't have connected digital twins if we aren't connected as companies. When you scale this up, there are numerous companies/sectors employing digital twins. How would you prioritize the connectedness with multiple actors?
I'm not sure I would prioritise, is my personal opinion. I think our role is to create the environment where this happens. And I think just like no one designed the internet, you know, the environment was created whereby it evolved and it emerged from. And I very much see digital twins doing that. And this is the huge value that CPC and the digital twin hub. It's not just the materials that are important, it's the environment that the materials are in, the ecosystem. This room today, this meeting we're having today, creates the environment that gives people the confidence, the tools to get the investment. And I think things will emerge. And I think you will gradually see things converge over time, as opposed to trying to design where you want value. We are going to focus on rail, or we are going to focus on road. You know, I think you've got to be ready for these things, both emotionally invested in the work you do and financially invested in it. And to force it on a sector that's not ready will actually crush the idea. And I think about what can we do more to create the environment where the ideas grow, as opposed to telling which idea is going to grow first. Might be a better way of doing it.
And I think people will recognise that. As I say, I've got 3 workshops going on this week. We've got a bunch of people looking at net zero, we've got a bunch of people looking at homes of 2030, and we've got a bunch of people looking at road reconfiguration. They're all looking at it in their individual silos. We can see already what's coming out of that is synergies, themes. So as we produce these 3 elements, that will naturally form and naturally happen. But I think sometimes it's hard, as Davin said, you can't tell these people, but let's create it, let's co-create it, let's show these people. And I think then we'll get real buy-in to the connectedness and the ability to connect across an organisation.
Yeah, I think like it's important to have a systems approach here, and also like invest in innovation, explore the different domain of knowledge, and build up on existing knowledge and experience. And in this case, I think establishing a good foundation data model, like going again to the basics, and through an ontology model, you could better understand relationships, interdependencies between different actors, and that provide a lot of clarity going back to that.
Great. Okay, so for our next question, has anyone in the working group experienced implementing digital twins into an environment with many different stakeholders who all are separate entities, have different priorities, and are not willing to spend on a common digital twin?
Guilty. Yes, I mean, we all have businesses, and I'm sure there are functions within your business that are colloquially known as the independent republic of, and you know, we are no different. You know, we run a big capital program, you know, billions every year, and they all have their own different ways, and they've digitally twinned their local way of working. So we have digital octuplets, as I joke, in our company. And I think that's just the nature of it, and I think that's just things emerging and converging over time. So I'm not necessarily worried at the moment, because actually the intent was positive. No one deliberately sought out to make an independent digital twin because they're selfish. They genuinely believe they wanted to do the right thing. So I think we're in the growing phases of that, and you know, when you're in your teenage years, you go a bit wobbly for a bit. I think as we start getting into our 20s and 30s, things kind of stabilise. So I think we have got loads of digital twins, especially in our organisation. I'm not too worried about it yet, because what it tells me is that there are people who care. The thing for me next is about how to harness them, how to pull them together, and how to give them a bit of direction so that we don't end up with 8 different babies.
We can move on, John, if you want. Grab a couple more questions.
I might add another comment to that. And if you're interested in learning about a program that kind of is encountering similar problems, you could definitely reach out to the Credo team here at Connected Places Catapult. Sarah Hayes or Elliot, I want to butcher his last name, Crisudo, are the individuals leading the effort, and I guarantee you they have a lot of experience when it comes to kind of working through those values and working with multiple organizations. But before that, the next question, how can individuals get involved or support this working group moving forward?
Come on in. The more the merrier. Contact John.
Yeah. Honestly, probably the best thing we can do is after the sessions today, this is for all of our sessions, they're all recorded and they will be put on the DT Hub itself, and you'll be able to access the slide decks, access all the bios of the speakers, and also recording. And in that, we will also have call to action pages so you can join, figure out how you can get involved. We're close on time, but we're going to ask a few more questions just because.
The power you wield.
Yeah. So this next question, is it actually useful to use the term digital twin when speaking with these personas/stakeholders?
Depends on the persona stakeholder. When I talk to the leader of the council, I'd never use the term digital twin. It would turn him off immediately. If I'm talking to my CIO, no issue, he gets it. So I think you've really got to understand the persona, the type, the motivations, and then use your, tailor your language appropriately.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say in sometimes you want to do it, digital twins are a big thing. There's a lot of industry buzz about it. There's a lot of things. Your company needs to have a position on it so you can remain relevant, attract talent, and all those things. But if I was ever trying to sell an investment into building a digital twin, I would probably use the language of the value it creates, depending on who I'm talking to. So the digital twin, a big part of us is our digital lab and how we do that. When I was talking to our director of HR about that, I never talked about a digital lab. I talked about where's that agile environment that all graduates joining the company can work in for 6 months to experience a different way of digitally leading a business. How does this improve our talent retention and our employer value proposition when we want to recruit? The fact that it was a digital lab to create digital twins was irrelevant. The value for her was in the conversation around attracting and retaining talent. And that's an example of the personas that I meant and where you may want to use or not want to use a digital twin language.
Davin, Liz, Ira, thank you very much, and thank you to our audience.